Welcome to Hello Self. It's a podcast focused on turning your can'ts into cans and your dreams into plans. I am your host, coach, and author, Patricia Leonard. Hello and welcome to Hello Self podcast. I am your host, Patricia Leonard, and I'm ready to take you on a final journey of a series that I have been doing over the past 6 months. And the series is titled The Law of Attraction. And I'll bring you up to date on some of the podcasts that I've already done on the law of attraction, and then introduce one that I am doing today. And it's all about relationships and what's love got to do with all of this anyway. So some of the topics that I've covered, well, let me just first of all say that Hello Self, really the mission of it is to help you get out of your can'ts and into your cans and get those dreams and goals off of that someday shelf. So as I said, this is a series that I am winding up now on the law of attraction. Some of the topics that I've covered previously in my Hello Self podcast has been, is attraction love? Compatibility in relationships. What is that? And do we have compatibility? And how do we know? Communication in relationships. How do we communicate, or are we communicating? I also covered something on the 8 types of love experienced in relationships. Another one was, what does age have to do with the success of relationships? From the law of attraction. Love and romance in the workplace is another topic I covered. And then, is infatuation really love? So what I did is I took this series on the law of attraction and just pointed out some significant things, starting with my own life, but doing some research of what has been happening and what are the experts saying about the law of attraction and love regarding relationships. So the one today that I'm going to do, and is the final in this series of 10, it's still the law of attraction, focused on the changing landscape of love and marriage, relationships, partnerships, marriage. So has there been a lot of changes in the way we view love and marriage and partnerships and relationships in general? So I'll be covering that today, and I have a lot of notes here that I'll be referring to just to keep me focused on some of the things that I want to cover in this. In recently searching articles on the topics of relationship, partnership, and marriage, it seems that various scientific, organizational, and individual data are suggesting this, that lifelong love and heterosexual marriage are about as dated as a horse and carriage. So I think you can begin to see that there's been significant change in the way we see marriage, the way we view partnerships, the way we see a relationship. So what do we call it? Do we call it a relationship? Do we call it a partnership? Or are we going to get married? I was talking to someone yesterday, and we were talking about this subject. And he and I realized that love may not be for a lifetime. And some of you may have experienced that. Well, at least a different type of love. What we're trying to say is, can we shift with the various phases of love? Is love here for a season or a lifetime? Is it here for a reason? And some of the reasons might simply be that the couple wants children. So they came together specifically for that. Maybe that's what enhanced their relationship or their love for one another. Maybe they just wanted a partnership, someone that they could do things with, dinner dates, traveling. And maybe they call it a relationship. They just like one another. They're good friends. They have similar interests in organizations or artistic endeavors. Or I think it's very interesting. As I started to do research on this, I begin to see how it may have begun years ago, based upon, like we said, the horse and carriage, and how it is today, and how we accept romance. I told you I did this one on age. And yes, generally, if you listen to my podcast, you'll see that generally people do stay together in their age group. However, that is getting to be more and more, or less and less, of an issue. A lot of people are 40 years apart, 50 years apart. But maybe it's not for a lifetime, and maybe it is. Maybe they came together because right now they have similar interests and they have this affection for one another. So I think that's what, when it says, scientific research says that marriage is as outdated as the horse and carriage. Let's just go on to see what else I discovered. Are we really leaving behind the old model of love and intimacy, or are these changes significant but not radical? And what are the driving forces behind the data being reported and the change we see? What's driving all of this change? Let's establish a starting point right here. Let's look at some of the data being reported. Specifically in the United States, marriage historically has been an important and esteemed social institution. But today, nearly half of all marriages end in divorce. It may not have been for a lifetime, maybe when it started out that way, but love shift, intimacy shift, things that we maybe think will last forever don't always last forever, because we mature, or we came in for a reason, or we came in for a season, and maybe not a lifetime. And maybe at that point we did say a lifetime, but then a lot of things changed. But today, nearly half of all marriages end in divorce. People are getting married later. So there's a lot of things going on impacting this. They're getting married later than they used to. The median age at first marriage is now 28 for men and 26 for women. A lot of times they're putting their careers first. The proportion of adults who never marry remain low, but has been climbing in recent years. So marriage may not be for everybody. Maybe what they want is a relationship. Maybe what they want is a partnership. It's a shifting societal norm that we're beginning to see. Roughly in 2006, 19% of men and 13% of women aged 40 to 44 had never married. And years ago, 1920, maybe even earlier, marriage took place and was even expected. More than half of all American marriage now begins as cohabitants. cohabitation. So they start living together first. That was not part of the norm a few years ago. As a matter of fact, it was not seen, recognized as something that was accepted. How and why is this change happening? Let's just look at some thoughts. Two prominent sociologists have offered different but related theories about what is happening. The British theorist Anthony Giddens argues that we are all witnessing a transformation of intimacy. And the American family scholar Andrew Cherlin suggests that we are witnessing the deinstitutionalization of marriage. We're breaking down what we used to say was a normal institution of marriage, and we're seeing it different, experiencing it different. In his book of 1992, The Transformation of Intimacy, Giddens observed that intimacy is undergoing radical change with the romantic love model, which encompasses the vow of till death do us part, which is being replaced by a new model he calls the confluent love. Confluent love model features the ideal of the relationship, meaning that a relationship that is entered into for its own sake and maintained only as long as both partners get enough satisfaction from it to stick around. It's based upon how the relationship moves forward. It's going to change over time. And as it makes those changes based upon our own personal growth, our own personal interest, our decisions about what we think love is at a certain point in our life. So we're looking at it because of changes. It's not a static kind of look. Confluent love is a moving kind of love or a growing kind of love. Sometimes it grows together. Sometimes it grows apart. Sometimes it grows in a different direction. Not always apart. And together in a different direction sometimes. But the people stay together, but it's different, a different experience. Maybe children brought in that. Maybe an interest that the individual developed over time. Maybe a community they lived in, or maybe a community they were part of that really shifted how they see and experience relationships. The confluent love model features the ideal of the relationship, meaning a relationship that is entered into for its own sake and maintained only as long as both partners get enough satisfaction. Instead of people staying together for the sake of staying together and being miserable, perhaps, or having totally different interests and nothing to talk about anymore, nothing to share. Instead of us just sticking in that because we made a vow, it's not happening anymore. As long as the two agree, or even if only one agrees. Sometimes the one person saying, I don't feel the same as I did before. At least they are beginning to understand that something is going on, and perhaps they can work on it if they can see that I'm not feeling the same kind of love that I felt before, or the interests are so different that there's just nothing to share, it seems. But at least in this kind of confluent love model, they start to talk about it. It either shifts to stay or it shifts to go apart. And instead of anger and regret for staying, or anger for staying in, or anger for leaving, it's a rational conversation about it, because now they're experiencing a reason, or a rational reason, or at least an understanding of where they are. As family and religious traditions lose influence, because we grew up in a society that said, this is the way you should live. This is the way marriage is. Now, I'm not advocating anything here. I'm simply pointing out some of the things that are going on in our society, because number one, our shifting society, our shifting social norms, our various age groups, are looking at our own self in our personal growth and our personal shifts. So it's not just sticking in because we think that's what we're supposed to do. It's really looking at, and some people have stayed in marriages and didn't like each other for years, but they felt like they had to because that was the social norm, or they had a religious commitment, but they were not happy, and they were not fair to the partner, and they did not experience love. Rather than have regret, have a conversation about it, is what confluent love is about. And how are you feeling? What can we do to change this? Or has the season ended for this relationship? As family and religious traditions lose influence, people craft their own biographies through highly individualized choice, specifically focused on individual autonomy. Now, some people would say, you gave that up when you got married. No, you can fake it if you want to and be miserable or treat each other in a way that is not love. Or you can decide to have a conversation about it and move in a different direction. Again, like my friend and I were talking last night, is it a season, a reason, or a lifetime? Where are you in that? At the same time, the contingent nature of the relationship commitment breeds psychological insecurity, which manifests in higher levels of anxiety and addiction. So as we start to lose that, individualize the opportunities to choose, we can stay and feel anxious all the time and not be, and sometimes it even turns to addictions, to miserable kind of living and things that we wouldn't normally do if true love were involved. The addiction might even be finding somebody else to find our intimacy with, and then feeling bad or upset with ourselves because we have that desire. Maybe the love situation that was initially there has shifted, and the couple won't talk about it. Or wherever they were, the partnership, they wouldn't talk about it. What we're doing now, or what we're looking at now, is a society changing to have more conversation about it, about their feelings, acknowledging how they are, and taking off the blinders of the relationship that they're facing. The law of attraction, has it been lost? Is the law of attraction different? I respect you as a professional. However, I don't have the feeling of intimacy that I had before. Now, what has caused that? So we can have a conversation about it. The social norms that define and guide people's behavior within the institution of marriage are weakening, as we've been saying. according to Cherlin. People today experience greater freedom in how to be married and in when and whether to marry at all. Maybe marriage is not what we want. Maybe what we want is a partnership, and we define what that partnership is. Or maybe it's a relationship that we just really enjoy one another and we play tennis together every week, or we like cards, or we travel together. We can redefine what that intimacy is about and that feeling of love. Today, people experience greater freedom in how to be married and in when and whether to marry at all. The future of marriage is hard to predict, but Cherlin argues it is likely to regain its former status. Rather, it is unlikely, to regain its former status. Rather, it will either persist as an important but no longer dominant relationship form, or it will fade into the background as one of many relationship options. We can say that marriage is not for everyone, and each of the individuals has to determine that. And sometimes I think one of the people in the relationship really want marriage, and the other one doesn't really feel that same need. But the one that wants it keeps working on the other, and we have to learn that it's not going to be mutual unless we both agree that this is what we want and we have a conversation about it. Women have been notorious, I think, for, and maybe men, I don't know, but I can speak to my sex, being notorious and thinking, I can change that. He maybe doesn't do this, but I can change that. Or he's not as romantic as I would like, but I can change that. Or she is not really, it could be the man, she is not really the motherly type. But when we come together, I think it'll work out as we could be good parents. We always are thinking we can manipulate the other into our way of thinking about relationships and love. The future of marriage is hard to predict, he says. And I would agree, just looking at where I am right now, is what would a relationship for me be like at my age and my past experiences and my independence? In his recent book, The Marriage Go-Round, Cherlin documents the fact that the deinstitutionalization of marriage has not gone as far in the United States as in Western countries. Interesting, huh? Americans have established a pattern of high marriage and remarriage rates, frequent divorce and separation, and more short-lived cohabitations relative to other countries. The result is that Cherlin calls, here's what he calls it, a carousel of intimate relationships, like a merry-go-round, leading American adults and children they have to face more transition and upheaval in their personal lives. Perhaps those are some of the issues that we're facing in our society today. Cherlin concludes that this unique American pattern results from the embrace of two contradictory cultural ideals, marriage and individualism. So Cherlin concludes that this unique American pattern results from the embrace of two contradictory, I'll get it out, cultural ideals. Should I marry, or should I stay single? What is it I really want? And can I meet what I want in a marriage environment, or should I stay single? Or should I have a relationship? Or should I have a partnership? Can I get what I want as an individual? I think, as all of you can see, that individuals, the individual is much more focused on themselves than they ever have been. In years past, in the horse and carriage age, I think people were willing to give up some of their own individual desires and wants. Whereas today, I think our society is stressing individualism. What is it you want? And I want what I want. Can I have that in a marriage? Can I have that in a partnership? So it starts to look at how that love or that intimacy aspect of my life fits in these different opportunities or options. What do young people want? Let's look at that piece now, and to see, this will give us an idea of our shifting societal norms and traditions, I think. What do young people want is some of the research that I looked at. To understand where intimacy in America is headed, we might look to youth as a harbinger of future developments. What is this bringing to our future regarding love, marriage, partnerships, and all this, and our own independence? Can we have all of that? Today's mainstream media paints a picture of young people having substantially different attitudes toward intimacy compared to the older generations. What we used to think was the norm and that we wanted was marriage. And our whole ideal was to find somebody to marry, get out of college, find somebody, get out of high school, marry your sweetheart in high school. People are looking at different choices for themselves and not so much in living out the traditional norms that have been set in place. In some ways, young people's attitudes toward relationship today are quite like the attitudes of their parents. A lot of times, however, even if that's where they are to begin with, and when living in a society that's very much about individualism, and they start to get out from under this traditional belief from their parents, that's sometimes where we get on that merry-go-round of divorce, trying other intimacy avenues, looking at different ways to get our needs met and satisfied. A 2001 study by Arlen Thornton and Linda Young DeMarco compares the attitudes of high school students across time from the late 1970s to the 1990s. They find strong support for marriage among both male and female students across the 2-decade period. The percentage of female students who rated having a good marriage and family life as their priority extremely important was roughly 80% through this time period, and the percentage of males hovered around 70. So we could already see in this period from 70s to 90s that there was beginning to be a different attitude in the male and female youth about what they really wanted out of family life and marriage. Changing gender roles was a big aspect of that. It was translating into changes in mate preferences across the decades with women financial prospects. Because you can remember, well, maybe you can't, but your parents might be able to, when it was very important for a woman to find a man with financial means. And so she would look out there, could they support our family? Do they have the means to make money? That was becoming real important to women. With women's financial prospects becoming more important to men and men's ambitious and industrialness becoming less. In other words, there was a shift. More women were moving into the workplace and getting high paid positions, the same as men. It was no longer that total driving about the financial aspects, because a lot of that was beginning to shift. Women were even making more money than men. So those kind of factors for looking for intimacy or relationships or partnerships was shifting simply because of the transitioning of our society and the opportunities for professional roles and financial success in both ways. A lot of women had purchased their own homes before they got married. And so it used to be years ago, that's something they would buy together, but with different means and different focuses in the marketplace, they had their own independence financially. And so it was no longer that pull that this is what we're looking for in a relationship. The shifting changed from financial to, well, what is the attraction? What do I want in a man, or what do I want in a woman? So it began to shift toward other aspects of priority. A recent study published in the Journalism of Marriage and Family compared the relationship attitudes and values of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and heterosexual 18 to 28-year-olds. Notably, people in these groups were highly likely to consider love, faithfulness, and long-term commitment as extremely important values in an intimate relationship. Isn't that interesting that as we begin to look at relationships from all angles, financial, human choice, gay, lesbian, heterosexual, we started seeing some similar kind of things from the traditions come up. These findings indicate that romantic love is widely embraced by most young adults, which we might not have thought about when we first started this piece, regardless of sexual orientation. Whether you're gay, lesbian, whether you're heterosexual, whether you're 18, love, marriage, partnerships, we're taking on a whole different look. It says these findings indicate that romantic love is widely embraced by most young adults, regardless of sexual orientation. So romantic love, which contest stereotypes and contrary reports that sexual minorities have radically different aspirations for intimacy in their lives. And that's not necessarily true. The sexual minorities have radically different aspirations. So it doesn't. These stereotypes said that, oh, yes, it's very different in this group, or it's very different in that group. What the studies and the scientific research has proven that it's not. Romantic love is widely embraced. Now, romantic love in a relationship might not be sexual love. Romantic love in a partnership might not be sexual love. It could be intimate, holding. So they see different, maybe it's defining these aspects of what love is in a totally different way, based upon the shifting times and the individual desires. Some studies found that sexual minority young adults report being more willing to date someone of a different race or enter less financially secure relationships than heterosexual young adults. So the man and woman standpoint, the heterosexual, and in our way of thinking, was much more focused on things that were not that important to sexual minority young adults, being more willing to date someone of a different race, someone of a different. So it wasn't so much let's find somebody that can support us, or let's find somebody that fits everything that we want in our life, the race, the gender, it didn't matter. It was much more about romantic love, romantic, the partnership, the feeling of connectedness and intimacy was different. It was not just sexual. And that is true you can see that in a relationship. We maybe have a intimate relationship because we like the same sports, or we're both very interested in the arts. We may have a partnership because we can bring, let's say, to our interest in arts, we can bring, the one partner brings editing and another partner brings the creativity. Or we can get married and start our own business if we decided to do that, and start a family. But it doesn't have to be an either or, as we've faced it in a lot of relationships. And people are finding intimacy across many landscapes, which is what we said we were going to be looking at. Why does intimacy matter? If the ideals of today's young adults are any indication, Americans still place a high value on traditional romantic love ideals for relationships. Isn't that interesting? Including the ideal of lifelong marriage. So it says that we still focus a lot of value on the traditional romantic love relationships, including long marriage. So even though we see ourselves caught up on this merry-go-round, it still says that the total number of people still value, especially young adults, still value the things of ideal marriage. Now, as they mature, that's where we saw the shifting of things beginning to happen in the present day. But ideally, they start with this idea of lifelong marriage. And yet, all evidence suggests that many of us do not follow through. So it says that the young people still focus a lot on the ideal marriage, traditional marriage, yet evidence suggests that many of us do not follow through. So the actual situation is we're still on that merry-go-round, even though we begin, and that's probably some of our traditional bringing up and the stereotype, but those stereotypes are changing now. We may feel them when we're young and feel that, but as we mature, we look at marriage, relationships, partnerships in a totally different way. I have experienced, in my own life, I can say, I have experienced all three. I've been married. I've been in relationships that were not sexually intimate, but very intimate from the standpoint of love. It's not uncommon for me to tell someone, I love you. I'm very attracted to you. And that's real. It's real. And I love them in certain ways. And then I've also experienced the partnership. I had all three: intimate relationship, a partnership, and a mutual relationship in someone that I lived with. In a partnership, we lived together. So I have experienced all of these, and I have experienced love in every one of them in some way. Sometimes when you enter in one way, you see the person from this standpoint. And I think it's all about where we are. That's why I say hello self is so important. Are you marrying, or are you in this partnership because you need somebody, because you think it's the right thing to do, because your religious background says you need to do this if you're going to do this? That creates our merry-go-round. We're not clear what we want, and I think in the one series that I did on communication, I think that the whole thing is we don't talk. We don't talk about, I'm changing. Hello Self is about recognizing, who am I today? Am I same as I was 10 years ago? Am I just going to stay where I chose what I chose 10 years ago because of tradition, because of societal norms? Make myself miserable and the person that I'm in the relationship miserable? That can happen in business. I think sometimes we start out in business relationships and they don't work after a few years. That's because that we have changed. The person has changed. And maybe they see the business from different standpoint. One great thing that we know about life and we know about ourselves is that we change over time. That's why I wrote a book years ago called Wearing High Heels in a Flip-Flop World, because I believe that we need to get out of our flip-flop life, that is complacency, and step into a high heels understanding of who we are. We change, we grow, we learn from our mistakes, from the opportunities we had, and yet we expect that the other person should understand that. So in a law of attraction starts at one point. However, these other commitments have to be looked at on a regular basis, not just from the commitment, but from who we are. Hello, self. I recently did a monologue, my spiritual self talking to my physical self. And I talked to my physical self. Why did you make this decision? Why did you make that decision? Why did you say, no, this can't happen? So it was a real eye-opening for me and the audience that heard me saying, everybody needs to do this. Everybody needs to have an experience of hello self. Who am I today? Yet all evidence, and I want to say this again, why does intimacy matter? It says that we all have this ideal for traditional relationships, love and marriage. What difference does it matter if intimacy behaviors are changing? Some social scientists see these shifts as alarming, whereas others welcome the changes. Some of us see that those shifts are really alarming, while others say, oh, you know what? Those are necessary and overdue. Understanding the various influences impacting relationships, love, and marriage can only enrich our appreciation of marriage traditions, but also help us manage the complexities of love and partnership in a multicultural, changing world. We're a changing world. We're living in a changing environment. We're changing. Can healthy, well-functioning societies be maintained without reinforcing marriage as the ideal family form? Can it? Evidence from other Western nations suggests that different models of intimacy are compatible with societal well-being, but societal policy must be aligned with the types of relationships that individuals choose to form. So it can and it needs to be aligned with individuals, the types of relationships that individuals choose. So, yes, we can follow some of the societal norms that have been with us for a long time and reinforce those. And it also suggests that models of intimacy are compatible with well-being of the individual. Many comparable countries have lower marriage rates and higher cohabitation rates than the US because we have certain ideals that say if you're going to have a certain type of intimacy, then you need to be married. That's been a United States, I would say, an ideal and a downfall, because it puts pressure on people to live together that don't really love each other, even though they said, well, we're married. I'm not advocating what's right or wrong. I'm saying you choose and your partner choose, or your relationship, and you're deciding on marriage, deciding on how this relationship is going to work for both of you. And is it for a season, a reason, or a lifetime? In the end, current research suggests a paradox, and you can see that, and so can I. Most people, including young adults, say things to researchers that suggest they hold fast to the ideal of exclusive, lifelong, intimate relationships, most commonly titled a marriage. Yet, often people behave in more ways aligned with the yet more people behave in ways more aligned with the pure relationship that Giddens argues is the ascendant model of intimacy. Boy, I'm having a hard time today. Gitt argues in the ascendant model that it's changing. Things are changing. Perhaps that contradiction indicates that it is harder than ever for people to live out their inspirations or aspirations about intimacy. So we may hold on to the ideal and yet find out that it's easier to say than to manifest or to live under that. At one point, we may say, yes, this is what we believe in. Then as we get in the life of living it, we see the model changing. We see our aspirations changing. We see the situation is not as we ideally thought, which is right. Is it staying and living in that? Or is it honoring where we and the other person is at that time? Gideon argues is pure relationship that is the ascendant model of an intimacy. Perhaps this contradiction indicates that it is harder than ever for people to live out their aspirations about intimacy. We all strive for the ideal, and yet we live in the world where we're faced with, can we live that ideal? Will we live it? What does it give us for living it? Or perhaps it suggests that we are indeed amid a transition to a brave new world of intimacy. And people's willingness or ability to articulate new relationship values has yet to catch up with the changes in their actual behavior. So the values that they have is not in alignment with the behaviors or the values that they articulate. What are your thoughts? Behaviors and personal values regarding the future landscape in relationships, partnerships, and marriage. What are your thoughts about? Your thoughts, not only your thoughts, your behaviors and your personal values regarding future love landscape in relationships, partnerships, and marriage. I'll leave you with that because that is exactly where a hello self moment starts to take over. How do I believe? What kind of relationship am I experiencing now, or partnership or marriage? How do I view that? How am I living in that? How am I manifesting my values in my behaviors? And are they reflecting my personal values? Or am I doing it because it is expected of me? I think the future is something that we each have to define for ourselves in a relationship. And is this the end of it? Is it a season? The season's over. Was there a reason we had our children, or we started this business and we built a house? We had a reason. Or is it for marriage as defined a lifetime commitment? If so, if we still believe that it's for long term, a reason, a season, or a lifetime, if we still believe it's for lifetime, what are we willing to look at within ourselves and share that with the partner? Or what are we willing to shift in ourselves or to shift in our relationship? I think as I did all of this, there are no answers. The only, perhaps one of the great values of this Law of Attraction series is that it gives us some thinking points and some things to work on and some finding ourselves at certain points and say, what are they saying scientifically? It doesn't mean it's your answer. It simply means it gives you a basis to step forward from. I'm going to wrap it up here and again, leave it into your hands as to what's right for you, because society, scientists, mom and dad, parental guidance, nothing can say what is right for you. You have to decide that for yourself. And then if you're in one of those landscapes, partnership, relationship, or marriage, then to work through, what am I going to do without shame, without having regret in your life, without destroying the life of someone else just for the sake of a social norm and or an expectation. This is your host, Patricia Leonard. Remember, hello self is the best gift we can give ourselves. finding out who we are. It's a way to help us get out of our can'ts and move into our cans. It's a way for us to look at getting those dreams and goals off our someday shelf and taking action on them. So, you know what I always say in closing out: keep dreaming, keep living, and keep finding out more about Hello Self. Thank you for tuning in today, and God bless your journey on your relationships ahead. Thank you for joining Hello Self today, and may it offer insight and inspire you to stay on your runway to success. Like, share, and subscribe. And remember this: keep dreaming.